AI is inherently biased because everything the AIs know was built on this massive data set of inherently biased information. What do I mean when I say biased information? Biased information is things like all CEOs are white, middle-aged men, that all nurses are women, that all laborers are foreign, right? This is biased societal norms that has found its way into this data. And it's there because if you go online, you see this bias in all of the conversations that are had. And it's not true. It's a misrepresentation of the actual reality that we live in. And it's just a perpetuation of these stereotypes. But when companies are trying to figure out how to deal with bias, in some cases, they end up just going way too far. It is absolutely something that has to be dealt with. Because if we can deal with this bias in the data, it allows us to start to weed out through the use of AI, as AIs will become just commonplace used tools. We can remove these stereotypes from the understanding that that's the reality of the situation. And as kids start to use AI more and more in their schooling, in their education, and leaning on that, like we did with Google, it gives us an opportunity to teach them that the world is like a melting pot of differing cultures and people and styles and choices and tastes. One of the key things that I find super interesting is that when companies started looking at this biased data and the effect it has on the output from these language models, because when you start to make changes to the output to deal with this bias, it really starts to uncover the societal cultural bias that is just ingrained in everything. And all of that sounds bad. It's not, right? It is just an uncovering of the reality of how AIs work and how they're built and the information that goes into them, how problematic that is. So what do we do to fix it? The first step, of course, is to remove the bias from the data set. Kind of hard to do, but not impossible. The second step is to use a thing called reinforcement learning, which is where the AI will say, is this correct? And a human will go, no. Alternatively, you can use this data that you've created synthetically as a validation. For instance, the AI generates an image of a CEO. It's a white guy. It then validates it against this known set of unbiased data, not necessarily white guys. And then it comes back and goes, okay, that's not correct. That's not being inclusive. That doesn't understand the reality of the situation. So it is possible. And of course, every human has a way of dealing with bias. And that's that mental filter. What's in here and what's out there can be different. I have a filter that I don't necessarily need to say, oh, all blah, blah, blah. You can filter that. So that's another promising step in the research. Is it possible? Yeah, maybe. There's a lot of work that really needs to be done, especially as this data set that all of these language models are trained on is biased to start with. And we're talking petabytes of data, millions and millions of documents. The work it would take to go in and then systematically try and remove the bias is immense. Not to mention the people removing the bias have to understand all of their conscious and unconscious biases that they have, that they would be looking at this data going, is this biased or not? That's the yes, no, maybe. It is, though, a very evolving landscape. There are hundreds of developers, not thousands of developers working tirelessly, building new and inventive ways. And it is a known issue. It's not like this is random and small set. This is a known problem. And I think as language models from other cultures start to emerge, we should start to see a bit more of a melting pot where everything starts to come together. Hopefully, we'll see a leveling out of this biased information. So what do you think? Are you as hopeful as me that we will get to weed out bias in this data? Or do you think, no chance?